Good morning. Today is Tuesday, the 11th day of Adar, getting closer to Purim, special holiday. And today we begin chapter 33 in the Tanya. And the Alter Rebbe now is going back to what he discussed before in chapter 31. And that was how to get to have the joy, the simcha, the joy in serving Hashem in a time when you feel sometimes numbness, spiritual numbness. So in the previous chapters, the Alter Rebbe explained when we put the focus on the neshama, our spiritual part, what is most important to us? Is it our physical being or our spiritual being? And when you realize that the animalistic self really obstructs our spirituality, this you have to crush it down. And you realize how, in order to serve Hashem properly, you have to focus on the right thing. You have to focus on the neshama, the real self. However, the problem is that it can drag you down, can make you feel bad, feel sad. And this, the Alter Rebbe says, on the contrary. Yes, this crushing down will help you to bring out the neshama, bring out the soul which is in prison, which is in jail, and you bring it out. So you release the neshama that wants to be so much with God. And that itself brings it the greatest joy, knowing that you're bringing out your godly soul from its prison and you're able to connect to Hashem. And then in chapter 32, the Rebbe said that if you have this proper perspective on what is the body, what is the soul, what is important, that helps you to love your fellow Jew like you love yourself. That was the chapter 32, the heart of the Tanya. To be able to really love a fellow Jew, because really, as far as the soul is concerned, we are all one. And our fellow Jew is just the same as me. However, now the Alter Rebbe continues with how one can really get to the point of real joy in serving Hashem. And in a way, it is knowing how to get joy not only when you are involved in Torah mitzvahs, because what we said in chapter 31, that by being involved in Torah, studying Torah, doing mitzvahs, that helps to take the soul out of its prison. But here in the Alter Rebbe, what is going to say in this chapter 33 goes to the next level. And this is by the joy of hosting the king. What do I mean by hosting the king? You have a great joy when you host the king in your house. That brings you joy. When we follow the thinking, what Alter Rebbe is teaching us in this chapter 33, understanding how Hashem is the king. And when we say Hashem is the king, the oneness of God, that Hashem is everything, and we are nothing. And really, Hashem's existence before the creation of the world and after the creation of the world doesn't change anything in God. The world does not have anything, any value in the eyes of Hashem, because it's all part of Hashem. In order to get to this point, the Alter Rebbe says it comes by stages. You have to meditate, you have to understand it, you have to appreciate this. And this is actually something that the Alter Rebbe speaks in a few places in Tanya. We learned it in chapter 20, chapter 21. We learned it in the other part of the Tanya, Shar Yichud Ve'emunah, and about the oneness of God. Here it says the Alter Rebbe how this knowledge and understanding, when we focus on this will help us to really get the feeling of appreciation and the feeling of joy in hosting Hashem in us by the very fact that we know Hashem and the very fact that we believe in Hashem, the faith, the belief that we have in Hashem. And that is something that it doesn't come by itself. You have to work on it, to meditate. Like it says, Da et Elokei Avicha, know the God of your fathers, then you can serve him of Deyu Belev Shalem. Then you can serve them with a full heart. So this is what he focuses in this chapter 33, that the knowing the oneness of God, and he gives us a few examples, will help us to really appreciate the fact that we are hosting Hashem, and that brings us the greatest joy. So let's look inside. Oidzoi, says the Alter Rebbe, Oidzoi tiye simchas hanefesh amitis. There's another way. Another means that leading one's soul to true joy. Ubefrat, and especially, kesheroye benafshoi beitim mezumonim shetzorich lezakecho lohira besimchas levav. Because when we see, oftentimes, there are certain occasional times that you need to purify the soul. You need to bring some gladness. You need to refine your soul. You need to bring a gladness of heart. You need to bring it real, true spiritual joy. Says the Alter Rebbe, Ozai yamik machshavtei. You should then think deeply. V'yitzayeh besichloi, and you picture in your mind, will be not any understanding, inyan yichudo yizborech amiti. Understanding the subject of God's true unity. I was saying we have to meditate about it. We have to think and you have to picture it as a picture that you see in front of your eyes. It becomes clear. So this is something that takes work, understanding, learning first of all. And the Alter Rebbe tells you 3 different stages of what you have to think of. Number 1, he says, Eich hu memale kol almin elyonim v'sachtonim. Let him consider how he permeates all worlds, both upper and lower. Va'afilu meloi. One second. So this is step number 1. The step number 1 is to meditate about the greatness of Hashem, that Hashem fills the world. What does it mean? That every single detail, every single creature in this world receives its exact life, sustenance, energy that this particular creature needs. Billions and billions of creatures in this world and in the higher spiritual world. The sun, the moon, the stars, the orbits, the angels, everything receives its particular exact the vitality, the sustenance that it needs. Then step number 2 is the concept of understanding that Hashem really encompasses the world. There is the vitality that each particular creature receives, but there is also that everything is to get together, receives we call it the soivev kol almin, from the encompassing light of Hashem. Meaning sometimes there is such the energy of Hashem to bring us all, to have us exist in the first place. There is the light which goes individually into each creature, but then there is the overwhelming power of energy of Hashem, which is equal by all creatures. That's what he says. Afilu meloi kol haaretz ala zu hu kavoda yizborech. let him further consider how even this world is filled with his glory. When we're talking about the glory of Hashem, glory is something that is encompassing, that is equal by all creature, by all being. That is step number 2. And step number 3 is to understand that vekula kamei kelo chashiv mamish, and how everything is of no reality whatsoever in his presence. Now the whole world does not have any value. It's as if it's not there. Vehu levadoi hu b'elyonim v'tachtonim mamish. He is one alone in the upper and the lower worlds. Exactly the way he was before the 6 days of creation. Hashem doesn't change anything in Hashem. The world is Hashem's creation, but it didn't add anything to God. Why? Because Hashem is above it. In the existence of Hashem, the world is nullified, doesn't exist, and he will soon bring 2 examples to understand this a little better. Even in this very place where this world, the heaven and the earth and all their hosts were created, he alone then filled this space. V'gam ato kain. And the truth is that right now, even after it was created, it is the exact same thing. Hu levadoi beli shum shinoi klal. Hashem is alone, without any changes whatsoever. The creation of the multiplicity of the creatures in this world did not add anything to Hashem's existence. Why? Mipnei shekol hanivroim betelim etzloi b'metzius mamish. Because all of the creatures are being utterly nullified in his existence. Now, to understand this, the Alter Rebbe brings 2 examples. The first example is example of speech. As we know, we spoke in the previous parts of the Tanya. The Alter Rebbe explains that what it says, that the world was created with speech. So he brings the analogy of speech, the letters, and as we explained in the previous lessons, it says when you have the letters of speaking, letters of you speak with words, with letters, you think with letters, but in the source of those words, where does it come from? It comes from the deeper parts of the soul, the emotions, the intellect. The intellect itself, you don't understand with letters. In other words, for example, you understand the concept of 1 + 1 = 2. What language is it? In what language does it equal to? In Russian or in Chinese or in English? The concept is above language. The understanding of the concept is above the letters. The same thing is also true with emotions. In what language do you love? You love in every language. It's above language, it's above letters. But then you come down, it brings down, and once you start thinking about it, then it goes down and it dresses itself into letters of thoughts, then you speak. So those very same letters, says the Alter Rebbe, when it's still in its source, which is the feeling, and the thinking, the understanding, obviously there it does not exist, doesn't have a independent existence. It's part of the soul and is nullified within the soul. Let's see inside. It says kebitul oisio isadibu ve'amachashava b'mekoiron ve'sharashon umehus hanefesh ve'atzmasa. He says all created beings are nullified before Hashem, just as the letters of speech and thought are nullified within their source and root. What is the source and root? The soul's substance and essence. Which are the 10 faculties, the 3 intellectual faculties and the 7 emotional faculties. Those are the essence of the soul compared to the thought, speech, and action. Obviously, there is the essence which is even higher than those 10 faculties. But here, compared in relative to these words, this is the essence of the soul. And there, the words, the letters, are nullified within the source. Over there are no letters as yet prior to their being clothed in the garment of thought. There's no letters. Before it comes down to the actual thinking, there is no letters, just understanding without letters. That's commotion is by as we explained in chapter 20, 21. Go back there and you can see more explanation. Then the Alter Rebbe brings a second example of the light, the ray of the sun within the sun. Says the Alter Rebbe, as explains this idea in another place, a physical metaphor, physical analogy, an analogy from physical phenomena, and that is me'inyan bitul ziv ve'oira shemesh b'mekoiroi. When you understand the nullification of the sun's radiance and light within its source, hu guf kadur hashemesh shebarakia, which is the very orb of the sun, the celestial orb of the sun. There, the light, the ray of the sun, is nullified. I mean, you can take an example also from go in a sunny day, go outside in the street, and take a light a lighter, or a match, a candle, and you ask someone, is the candle lit or not? You look at it and says, no, I don't see it. You don't see the light of this candle in a sunny day. It is nullified within the light. But what happens? What is it really lit? If you're going to touch it, you're going to burn your hands. Obviously, it's lit. So here brings the example from the sun. He says, "Shegam shom meiru mispashed vaday ziva ve'oiroi." For surely, its radiance and light glow and spread forth there too. In the sun, the light of this is the light there. Of course, it's there, and it's even much more than it is here. Much more than its radiance. It is much more than they exist when they spread and the glow in the space of the universe. So it exists. However, it exists, but it's nullified in its source. It cannot be in its source, in the orb of the sun. The light cannot be identified as a separate existence because it is part of the sun itself. Over there, it is nullified within that source. It is as if it doesn't exist at all. So here says the Alter Rebbe, the same thing is something what we need to understand, that the world's existence within Hashem is as if it doesn't exist at all. Nothing is as if it exists. Exactly so, figuratively speaking, the nullification of the entire world and everything within it is completely nullified in relation to its source, which is the light of the Ein Sof, the endless, the light of Hashem, the endless Hashem. As explained at length over there, in the part of Shayichud ve'emunah of the Tanya, and so on. So this is, says the Alter Rebbe, this is what step by step you have to think about, how Hashem feels everything, and it takes time. And you have to picture it as if it's in front of your eyes, as if you understand it, and how everything is there is in the encompassing light of Hashem. And finally, you reach the understanding how everything is really nullified within the existence of Hashem. It's like as if it's not existing. When one contemplates deeply and at length in this matter, Yismach liboy v'sogel nafshay, his heart will rejoice with this faith. V'afgilas v'ranein b'chol leiv v'nefesh u'me'oid be'emunazu. You will rejoice in this faith. His soul will be gladdened by it to the point of rejoicing and singing with all his heart and soul and might in this faith, in knowing this, understanding this, and believing in this. Kirabohi, and because this faith is tremendous. When a person is filled with this faith, kihi kirvas elokim mamash. Now this is the closeness of Hashem. The existence of this faith in our mind, in our soul, that is hosting Hashem in us. This is the closeness of God. And here is the famous verse that the Rebbe took this verse and he asked the children to study it by heart. One of the 12 verses the Rebbe said. Says, "V'zeh kol ha'adam, v'tachlis briyosei." This, in fact, is the whole purpose of man and the purpose for which he was created, and all of the worlds were created. Ubrias kol ha'olam esel yonim v'sachtoinim. And the creation of all of the worlds, the higher worlds and the lower worlds. What is the purpose? Liyos loy dira zoi betachtoinim. That God should have such a dwelling place here below, as will be explained further at length. What is the hosting? Is that emunah. This understanding in Hashem, the understanding and believing and feeling that Hashem is within us, and how we are nullified. Everything is nullified in that, in the presence of Hashem, and yet we have that existence of Hashem in us. We are hosting Hashem by knowing this, by understanding this. So brings the Alter Rebbe now the metaphor, the analogy, to the joy that a person has when hosting a king. A simple person, when you're hosting a king, brings us tremendous joy. How much more joy we should have knowing that we are hosting Hashem. Says the Alter Rebbe, "Kama gdoila simchas hedye to shfal anoshim." How great is the joy of a common and lowly person, beis karvusoi lemelech basav adam, when he is brought close to a king of flesh and blood. Amis achsein v'dor itoi imrim babayis, that the king dwells together with him in his home. How much joy this brings a person. The kal v'chaymer, and how much more so. Le'ein kates, infinitely more. Lekirvas v'diras melech malchei amlochim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How much more so we ought to be rejoicing in the nearness of the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, and His dwelling. That He's dwelling together with man in this physical world, which is man's home. And it is written, as it is written, for who is the man who dares to approach me, says God. So this leads a person to the great joy when you contemplate and you understand how much this closeness of Hashem, by the very fact that we understand the knowing and the feeling that Hashem, that the whole world is nothing. And that is when Hashem dwells in us, when we get this understanding. There's a story that I heard from, there was one of the Litvish Rabbanim in Russia, Rabbi Yecheskel Abramsky. And he was arrested. The Russian government, as many good Jews were at that time, for keeping Yiddishkeit and so on. And after his arrest, he met the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he told him that when he was in prison, he didn't have nothing, not his talis, not his tefillin, he couldn't study, good, nothing. And he woke up, gets up in the morning. What does a Jew say in the first thing in the morning? Is Ma'ide ani lefanecha, thanking Hashem, Melech Chai v'Kayam. And he's thinking to himself, what is there to thank Hashem for? I cannot praise. I cannot praise Hashem. I cannot daven. I cannot do. They took away everything from me. I cannot study Torah. And then he says, the last words that we say, but the Ma'ide ani is Rabba emunasecha. How great is your faith, faithfulness. He says, this is something that they couldn't take away from me. The emunah, the faith in Hashem, that they couldn't take away from me. And that itself, that I have the faith in Hashem, this is the greatest joy that I have. I'm able to serve Hashem with this emunah. So this is what the Alter Rebbe explains in this part of the Tanya. The understanding, the knowledge, the greatness of Hashem. For that, we need to study the Chassidus. We need to understand it deeply. The deeper you understand it, the more you appreciate it, and the greater joy you're able to create by having Hashem, hosting Hashem within you. So this is the end of today's shir. Thank you so much for joining. And sharing is caring. Tonight we'll have another beautiful class about Purim. So you're welcome to join us tonight at 8 p.m. Questions or comments, you're welcome